Okay. Ay.
Constantin Reliu wanted to disappear, so he chose Turkey. He had a wife and young daughter back home in Romania, but he chose to cut ties with them after learning about his wife's infidelity. Nearly 2 decades went by without his family and friends hearing from him, so they suspected that he was one of the 17,000 people to perish in a 7.6 magnitude earthquake which struck Turkey in 1999. He was, in fact, injured in the earthquake. His left foot was broken in two, and his hand was sliced up after walls collapsed on top of him, but he did survive, although he kept it a secret from his loved ones in Romania. He explains, "I tried to forget everything from my previous life. In 19 years, I only spoke Romanian twice. I didn't want to know anything about the country. I didn't read the news. I didn't want to know who the president was. I wanted to completely forget. I cut off ties with everyone, as I didn't want them tracking me down. I knew it was hard for my daughter, but I felt it would be better for her." In 2016, his wife wanted to get remarried, but she was still legally tied to her missing husband, who she needed consent from to divorce. However, as long as she had sufficient evidence that he was dead, there was a way for her to end the marriage. Therefore, she filed for his death certificate, arguing in court that she believed he died in the previously mentioned earthquake. The court's subsequent investigation into his whereabouts yielded no results. If he was still living in Turkey, there was no proof since they couldn't find any records of him in the country. And so, by May of 2016, he was declared dead. 2003, the year his passport expired, was used to serve as the year of his death. Meanwhile, he was working as a chef in Turkey and had no idea that he had just missed his own funeral. Well, at least not until 2 years later, after he was picked up by Turkish officials and deported to Romania for possessing expired residence papers. After landing in Romania, he was greeted by perplexed border officials who informed him that he was dead, and that they were not permitted to let a dead man enter the country. His fingerprints matched those on record, but customs officials were still not convinced. He spent the next 26 days in a detention center. On the last day there, they ran a battery of tests to see if he was who he said he was. They measured the proportions of his face, such as the amount of space between his eyes, and compared it to his old passport photo. A customs official who happened to be from his hometown questioned him to see if he was legitimately from there. After 6 hours, they let him go. However, his troubles had just begun, because in the eyes of the law, he was still nothing more than a walking corpse. When his mother saw him for the first time in nearly 2 decades, she went into shock and had to be hospitalized for 3 days. His friends were baffled, but made jokes like, "You look pretty good for a dead guy." A cop told him not to die because no one would bury you without your paperwork. Throughout the following months, Constantin Reliu lived a purgatorial existence. Without a social security number, he couldn't apply for a work permit, nor could he apply for benefits. Without a health card, he was left without treatment for his diabetes by doctors who refused to see him. Soon, the money that he brought from Turkey ran out. After that, he subsisted on handouts from families and friends. Quote, "Right now, I am very poor. I have no money for shoes. I have no electricity. I am very, very sad and very sick, and my organs are no longer functioning. I have 3 paralyzed fingers, and I cannot even lift a spoon or cut anything with a knife." He collected his drinking water from public fountains and smoked discarded cigarette butts picked up from off of the street. Everything he owned in Romania went to his wife after he was declared dead, including his dingy communist-era apartment in Barlad. Luckily, the apartment was empty when he returned, so at least he had a place to stay, albeit under murky legal grounds since even though he originally paid for it, it now belonged to his wife. He spent his days going back and forth between government agencies, trying to persuade them to issue him papers. Then he decided to appeal the ruling of his death declaration in court. And here's where the story becomes Kafkaesque. He took his case to court and lost. The reason he lost was because the court's ruling was on procedural grounds rather than the merits of his claim. He had a maximum of 2 years to annul the death declaration, and with that window of time closed shut, his appeal came in too late. Another reason he lost was due to terrible legal advice from a lawyer who didn't even show up to court. His lawyer made 2 egregious errors. First, he failed to account for the time limit of an appeal in a case like this. His second was applying to a different court than the one that had issued the declaration in the first place. Now, before you chalk this up to being just a quirk of the Romanian legal system, a similar thing did happen in American courts as recently as 2013. A man from Ohio named Donald E. Miller Jr. was declared dead by his wife in 1994 after he disappeared in 1986, leaving behind thousands of dollars of unpaid child support. Due to his missing status, She could not qualify for Social Security benefits for her and her 2 daughters, so she filed for a court to formalize his death, which they did. However, Donald E. Miller was not dead. In fact, he was very much alive and well in Georgia. By 2006, he returned to Ohio to visit his parents, who told him that he's been dead for the past 10 years. He tried to apply for a driver's license, but he was rejected since he was legally dead. Therefore, just like Reliu, he took his case to court and lost. According to Ohio law, a deceased person only has 3 years to challenge a declaration that he or she is deceased. He, on the other hand, was 10 years too late. Eventually, a judge recommended that he take his case to the Social Security Administration and request a new number. They did oblige, but he still remains legally dead in Ohio. Anyway, let's get back to Constantin Reliu. After losing his court case, he told press that, quote, "I think I'm gonna cry. I'm not sure whether I'm divorced or not. I'm not sure whether she's married to someone else or not. No one will tell me." His wife had remarried by then and was living in Italy. But he didn't know that because she wouldn't respond to his repeated attempts to contact her. In interviews, he described her as a witch who was the cause of all of his misery. He claimed that she bribed the court to declare him dead and that they knowingly used the testimony of 2 false witnesses. He said, "The file is a joke. On one hand, it says I died in the Turkish earthquake of 1999. On the other hand, it says I was working in 2001. He recounts that their marriage was unhappy and full of infidelity on both sides. In 1992, he was married to her when he first moved to Turkey to work as a cook. At first, he returned every few months and sent money back to her and his young daughter, but in 1999, he left for good after he caught her cheating on him. He said that every year when he and his wife were still together, they would go before the relic of Saint Parashiva in the city of Yash to swear that they would be faithful to one another. But when their car flipped over after one such excursion, Constantine took it as a sign from God that his wife was unfaithful. Following the accident, he says she became more blatant about her infidelity. Quote, "She cheated on me with so many men, an army colonel and a major. She turned my house into a brothel. Anyone who wanted to would come to my house to engage in Olympic sex. I have at least 100 witnesses that can testify about that. Not only that, but she killed 8 or 9 of her own babies." He clarified by saying, "She is a hermaphrodite with a pair of testicles and a clitoris that is something like 4 to 5 centimeters long. Because there was a fusion between her male and female hormones, she would behave like a man one week and a woman the next. All the doctors I met confirmed this diagnosis, that she hated children because of the fusion of her hormones." He then recalled that his late father told him on his deathbed that, "If you want to be happy, don't marry a rich and beautiful woman." Although he granted that she was neither, he bizarrely added that, quote, "My greatest mistake is that I didn't beat her up." Then he claimed that she put a curse on him. He explained that, "She was casting spells in Turkey. I traveled to the Black Village where the darkest wizards live. One wizard who didn't know me said, 'There are spells on you.' I was very confused because I am a firm believer in God. Not exactly sure why, but then he said, 'I'm not a Muslim.' Anyway, then he gets back to his story. The wizard said, 'I cannot dismantle the spell until I get an object belonging to my wife or a photograph.' He said that the curse allowed him to move as freely as a bird, but everything around him would be evil. Anyway, I thought I'd add quotes from that interview since, well, I find them funny. But let's get back to the main topic at hand. Due to the worldwide media coverage of his story, a lawyer offered to help Constantine with his case pro bono. This time they correctly appealed to the same court that had originally declared him dead. But when asked about his upcoming trial, Constantine expressed incredulousness. "I have had a few lawyers come, and there is a lawyer from Bucharest that is advising me now, but I would rather be judged on the Ivory Coast or anywhere in Africa than in Barlad, because it is completely corrupt there." When asked about his plans to convince the court that he's still alive, he said, "I will tell the judge to put his hand on my chest and listen to my heart." This time he won the case. It took several months for him to be resurrected, but on the second try, the 64-year-old cook succeeded. Afterwards, an act was admitted which overturned the law that resulted in his failure to appeal his death declaration. So there you have it, folks. That's the story of the deadbeat dad from Barlad. Yes, it's true that he's not the most likable guy, but his story is very compelling. Anyway, there's a lot more on the way. Until then, stay tuned for more weird stories. That's all.